when you're looking for multi-unit properties on Kauai, it's kind of like going down the rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland. There are a lot of issues that come to surface and can be very confusing as you're sorting out all of the other aspects of making a decision. So I want to give you some highlights briefly in this video. I'll send you some more information in writing, and then of course, depending on your particular needs, the type of property you're looking at, your financial plans, we'll delve into the topics that affect you in extreme detail. But just to give you some background, on Kauai, historically, what you would consider probably from a mainland perspective an in-law apartment used to be called an ohana unit. Prior to about the time of Hurricane Iniki in '92, those were legally permitted in-law apartments, basically, without any restriction on the square footage, couldn't have a kitchen, but on the older permits, those were legal and they were allowed in certain circumstances. So when we're looking at older properties built in the 80s or 70s, we often find what the selling agent may call an ohana unit, what would have to look into in more depth to see if that's grandfathered, if it's current, if there's any permitting issues going forward, or if you purchase it, what about when you go to sell it, and all of those things. So the ohana, and you probably know from watching Lilo and Stitch that ohana means family. The spirit of a lot of these zoning things that we're covering are about taking care of extended family, allowing extended family to live on the same property, and that was the intent of the original codes from the County of Kauai. So the ohana unit transformed into the additional dwelling unit with the same purpose. So to say I have a home on 15,000 square foot lot, and I want to be able to have my daughter and her family live on the same lot, but I'd like my privacy. So with the additional dwelling unit, I can pull a permit to allow me to build a second home, which can be completely detached, as long as I have, of course, the ADU permit, additional dwelling unit permit, saying that it's okay for that lot, and then as long as I have the appropriate sewage capacity, which on Hawaii generally means septic, or in the older houses, you'll find cesspools. But in current standards, it would have to be septic. And as long as that's what drives the size of the ADU that's allowed, rather than it can only be so many square feet. So when you see a listing as an additional dwelling unit, that's I wouldn't say red flag in terms of warning, but it is a trigger to say there's a lot more information that we would need to look into on that, because the ADUs that are on ag zone property are a little bit different than those that are in residential. And another point of information that we definitely need to look into more on a lot of these properties is, do they have septic, or is it an old cesspool? Because the federal law changed in April of 2005 to where multi-unit properties that are on cesspool had to be brought into conformity, and it would be a federal violation. So these are things that you don't always hear directly from the selling agent, and even sometimes you ask different questions from different departments at the county, you'll get different answers, but it takes some experience and time to know who to go to get the, as you would say, final answer, and in that case, you have to go to the Department of Health. And I digress, I'm sorry, we'll get into more detail on those things in person. So, just going back, we had the ohana, which transformed into the ADU. And as just a point of information, a lot of those older homes, unfortunately, all of the permit records were blown away in Hurricane Iniki. So sometimes we get caught in catch-22 situations where there is no record of the final inspection, that type of thing. Again, that's probably a whole other conversation over a cup of coffee. But just to let you know, those are the kinds of things that we can end up tripping upon in finding the perfect home for you, the one that you love, and then we look into the technical issues and why it's important to have an experienced, knowledgeable agent working for you as a buyer's agent, so that to advise you of all these different areas, and also to be thorough in the due diligence, either prior to making an offer, which can help with negotiating, or also or through the escrow in your inspection period. The third area, or the third topic that I wanted to cover in talking about residential multi-units is the guest house. This gets very confusing. If you just jump in the car and start looking at properties, we're looking at multi-unit properties, there'll be an ohana, it might be an ADU, it might be a guest house. Well, the guest house really is zoned and permitted to be just that. The intent from the county was to allow you to have a place where your visitors can stay for less than 30 days. So technically, people are not supposed to be living there long term, although you will hear people say, well, it's no problem, people do it all over the island, which may be true. But I'll tell you my style. I can tell you what people do, but I will tell you what the law is and what the the zoning is and what the requirements are, because in actuality, you could be at risk by using properties other than how they're zoned. So put that aside. Anyway, the guest house, when you have a guest house permit, the way that's intended is it to be for not long-term usage, and also generally not for vacation rental. Vacation rental usage of a guest house would be something that's kind of a hot topic right now due to some law changes this year, and again, that's probably a whole nother conversation. However, just very briefly, there are definite designated visitor destination areas, or VDAs, on the island, and any usage of property outside of those areas as a vacation rental is considered illegal unless they qualified for, some special use permits and so on. So again, a whole nother Pandora's box, which, depending on which way you're going looking at properties, is very important to check out. Back to the main topic of this video, though, is the guest house can be additional accommodations. However, depending on what your intention is for using it, if it's going to be visiting family, that's fine. If you're planning to do long-term rental, many people do. However, would really want you to know whether that is actually permitted on the property that you're looking at. So there we have Ohana, additional dwelling unit or ADU, and guest house. And then kind of beneath that whole genre is the important issue of permitting, of the septic systems, of the condition of the property, and what is allowed. Is it structured in compliance with how things are permitted currently?